Hey fam. So I figure everyone's talking about this right now, and for whatever my opinion matters, it's probably worth me talking about it as well, right? Natalie, Contrapoints, however you want to refer to her. Um, so I'm going to set this out at the onset. This is not going to be a video where I'm just going to sit on my high horse and critique her. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some experiences that I've had that relate to, I think, sort of a larger issue in the trans community right now. Might be able to hear some city sounds. Sorry, I need to have my window open. It is crazy hot in my apartment building right now. So there was a point over this past year. So throughout this entire past year, especially before I went to law school, before I started, I moved around a lot. Before I came out to my family, or most of my family, I'd been out to my mother for a while, but before I came out to everyone, or everyone else at the very least, I lived on my own down in the South, and I've talked about that before a little bit. Trying to get myself to a place where I could be financially independent and, able to take care of myself in the event that I wouldn't be able to have a relationship with my family once I did come out. And in the course of doing that, in the course of, getting to a place where I could be independent, I lived at a lot of different places. One of them, for a period of, I think it was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 months. Sorry, I know that's super vague. It's just been a whirlwind year. It doesn't really matter how many, the exact length of time in that regard. It's just, for a decently substantial amount of time, I lived in a town called Conway, Arkansas, right? How I got to Arkansas at all is a story in and of itself. But no, I went to Conway because when I was living in the South, and this was when I was, I think, about 6 or 7 months in the transition. I was just starting to see some results, medical transition, right? I was just starting to see some results, but I wasn't passing, right? I was still in largely, like a guide presentation. But, it was sort of getting, transition was revving up, and so it was this weird, sort of vulnerable part of my life, right? And up until this point, I hadn't really lived or been close to a lot of other trans people. I mean, I'd known other trans people, I was friends with some, but there hadn't really been any other people who had been super stable in my life, right? Fixtures in my personal life, until now, or until this point in the story when I went to Conway, because what brought me there was I met another trans girl on Reddit. I won't mention her name, for reasons that we'll get to, that we're talking about. When we met, it was one of the best things to ever happen to me. We had a crazy amount in common, from hobbies to different experiences with schooling and upbringing, right? It was actually so crazy that it was a running joke between us that we had so much in common. The first time we talked on Reddit, it was I remember I would scroll through the conversations, and it would just be minutes of just straight scrolling. That's how much we talked, right? The first month that the first time I met her, it was actually, it was fun. She really enjoys playing basketball, and so she suggested that we meet up at like this rec hall, right? This public rec hall, with some basketball courts. And the first day we met up, we played some basketball and that was fun. But we hung out for like 12 straight hours, and it was good. You know, I think, I've always been a pretty sort of emotionally stable sort of person, and she was in Arkansas, right? I had just recently gone to Arkansas for other reasons, and so I think it was really good for her. She and I were at very similar stages of transition. She wasn't as especially social. And I think that having someone around was just something very good for her mental and emotional health. And it was good for me because, like I said earlier, I was really lonely. We hung out regularly for about a month, and eventually I moved in with her. And those were some of the best months I've ever had. We went through a lot together. It was interesting because so we were in a duplex, right, and we were in one side of the duplex, and for a lot of the time I was living with her, it was mostly empty. Sorry. Yeah, it was like mostly empty. It had like no furniture in it except for like in the bedroom. It didn't even have like a table in the kitchen. We just like made food on the stove and like ate off the counter. But it was good. I had my computer. I actually just recently started building this computer that I'm using now, and we didn't need a ton of space. Like, we just enjoyed each other's company. For reasons that we don't need to get into now, I probably need to make a follow-up video to talk more about, that, our friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it, more specifically. But what's more important here is that eventually I moved out for reasons we're not going to get into right now. We were still close. I texted her all the time. She was like my confidant. At any given time, I always like to have like one person in my life who I'm just like texting all of my, most intimate thoughts and observations. Just like someone to tell stuff to. Someone you would probably call your best friend. And we had talked until I went to law school, right? And a little bit after I started law school, about a week or so in, she ghosted me, right? Just cut it off cold turkey. And I was really concerned about her. I was like, hey, I tried reaching out to her, I tried calling her, a lot, especially in the first couple days when I wasn't hearing from her. But then more so, as time went on, I scaled it back more and more. She had a tendency where if she got really sad or depressed, then she would sort of, she was an introvert, so she would just kind of shut out the world. So I was worried something bad had happened. About 2 months after she ghosted me, I reached out again. It was like I was just getting back in the car from shopping at Walmart. for my weekly groceries. And I sat down and I just thought about her when I was shopping, and I just sent her a text like, "Hey, I just thought about you. I hope you're doing all right." Right? And I got a response. Um, it was interesting though, because what I got back was a text full of like smiley face emojis and like all that. I was like, "Hey, who is this?" And I was like, "Oh no, she deleted my contact." And so I texted her back, "It's Riley." And the next time she texted me back pretty soon after, and she was like, "Oh, hi." Baltimore sounds, right? In case you can hear that. But no. All right. But no, I texted her back like, "Hey, like, why did you ghost me? Like, what happened? Where have you been?" And what she sent back to me, I mean, made me sort of freak out. She told me, "I just don't think we would be great friends." Which is crazy when you consider that literally I had lived with this person and we had been each other's like mutual essential support for like a very crucial part of our lives. I texted her back something to that effect, like, "That's crazy. Literally everything I've known about our relationship would suggest the exact opposite." I asked her if I could call her, and she said yeah. And I called her up, and I asked her just the same thing. At first, she didn't give me a clear answer why she didn't think we would be good friends. You know, she just dodged around, gave some different, excuses or whatever. And eventually I started crying. Because I mean, this was someone who I considered to be one of my best friends, who was telling me that they just decided that they'd want to be a part of my life. They gave two reasons, eventually, two pretty concrete reasons why they didn't want to be friends anymore. I'm not going to get into one because it's more personal and it's not really pertinent to the conversation. The other one that she gave, which seemed to be much more the reason why, was that she didn't want to be associated with anyone or anything that reminded her of the fact that she's trans. She has gotten to the point now in transition where she largely passes. And she says that, or she told me that if she could, she would, like, if she was able to do so, then she would never, ever acknowledge or think about the fact that she's trans. She sees it as a burden, something to be ashamed of. This is a video that I was making talking about Natalie. That's why I said at the onset. But I see the issue that people are talking about her as being something a bit larger. My friend, or whatever you want to call her, the person I lived with, apparently she didn't see us as friends. She told me that she never really had. I'm not sure how much truth I assign to that, but suffice it to say we don't talk anymore. But one thing is absolutely clear, is that she doesn't want to be known as trans. She's certainly not proud of being trans, and she is largely ashamed of it, which is very different from me. I want to be an advocate. I want to go out and defend the rights of trans people and LGBT people and minority people in general. And I've noticed this sort of a very distinct divide in a lot of the trans community, right? This is just an instance where it's affected me very personally. This is the point in the video where people ask me, or where I'm supposed to answer the question of, Riley, well, what do we do? What do we make of this? How do we respond? And I'm going to tell you a couple things. The first is that I don't have a great answer. Because the thing about this is that at the end of the day, when we're talking about people who are older or younger or who want to be known as trans or not, we're all in the same boat, right? As much as you might want to will away being trans, I mean, it's a part of who you are. I think that there's a lot of internalized transphobia there, if I'm going to have to guess. And there are problems there in and of itself, but there's also sort of a larger issue, right? Like, yes, there's internalized transphobia. I think that a lot of people deal with that in general, and I think that there's plenty of discussion within the community to that effect. But there's also this sort of question about just the nature of how we reconcile in a community that, you know, caters to both people who have very binary presentations of their gender and also people who don't. I think about my experiences over at the law school, right? I made a video about some not great experiences that I've had with a professor misgendering me on multiple occasions. Today, I had a meeting with a leading member of the student LGBT organization at the school. And today I had a meeting with the other co-chair and our secretary, right? And both of them are non-binary. And we talked about some of the problems that we faced and that other people we know have faced, at the law school. And, I mean, my problems are very different from theirs, right? Or I say that they're different, but I mean, like, they're different and yet similar at the same time. Because for both of us, everyone has the problem of being misgendered, right? But in the words of the other co-chair, and this is where I sort of feel like I feel like this comment kind of digs at the nature of this divide, and it's worth bringing attention to. What they told me was that, they get misgendered, but, professors also don't take them seriously, right? And I don't think that they implied that, they didn't imply anything negative towards me. Certainly I didn't get that perception, but this was in the context of a conversation where I told them about how this professor who misgendered me felt extremely sorry and went out of their way to apologize to me, right, on multiple occasions, whereas it seems like they've been misgendered, but no one has really apologized to them about it, even though they rightly should. And so there's this issue, right, where you have trans people who are at this point regarded as, valid by larger society, but people who are especially non-binary or non-passing trans people who are binary, who aren't regarded as legitimate or valid, and who people don't feel the need to go to bat for. And so there's this question for binary trans people, right? there's sort of this proposition. There's two different ways that we can react to this sort of a situation. We can either, on one hand, react like the person who I lived with and like Natalie, and sort of take the side of larger society. Yeah, I don't understand it, but you know, it's just a phase, or oh, we're not going to take this seriously, or you know, whatever you want to insert. There's certainly a much lesser treatment of non-binary identity, and so I have the option to either jump on that bandwagon or to be visible in my own right and stand with them. And I mean, I feel like you know what I'm going to do, considering I'm like the leader of this organization and I have to look out for these people. But I'm also talking about the average trans person, right? What I'm really asking you... Baltimore City sounds, right? Great. What I'm really asking you to consider, alright, is that even if you do get to a point where you're passing, or people at least acknowledge your gender, to go out of your way to increase your visibility of being trans. So, this thermos, I've had it in all my videos so far. I take this with me everywhere. Not sure if the lighting is great, but you can see right here, you know, I have my pronoun sticker, you know, for everyone to see. And it's pretty visible, you know, like if I go up to like a shopkeeper or a counter, like I like boom slam this on the counter, or not like slam, but like people definitely notice. And even though people might gender me correctly intuitively, this probably tips them off, letting them know that I'm trans. Or if it doesn't, they know that I am very vocally supportive. But the thing is, I'm at the point where I really don't care that much whether or not people acknowledge me as trans. And I think that's sort of what I would recommend. I'm thinking out loud right now. I also made this video in response to, I was watching a video by Pig Puncture. He seems pretty cool. I was watching it on, you know, he was critiquing Natalie and, you know, talking about the fact that Natalie tweeted out the, you know, the tweet where she was like, oh yeah, I'm sitting in a circle with 20 other women and everyone's going around introducing their pronouns and I'm just sitting there like, well, this is awkward. You know, and just how she commented on the fact that like she doesn't want to introduce herself by her pronouns. She just wants people to intuitively, you know, recognize her pronouns. And so she'll like never introduce herself by them. And I get why, right? Like, I understand that. It's hard. Because, you know, I've done, like, a ton of work, you know. You can look at my transition video. I've done a ton of work to get to where I'm at, to where I am, right? You know, I feel confident as shit going around, right? Because most people gender me how I want to, just intuitively. And so it can be a hard thing to take that and then to do something which would otherwise indicate to someone who might not know that you are trans. It's sort of like making, like going out of your way to make yourself clockable, if you want to say it in those terms. And that can be hard, right? But I would just invite you to think about what it means to be trans and whether or not that can just be a good thing. Or if not even that, then at least a neutral thing. So what if you are? So what if you're trans? Why is it a bad thing? I think that when people try to hide the fact that they're trans, it sends a message implicitly that that's something that you're ashamed of, or at the very least that it makes that if other people were to know that you were trans, then it would devalue your identity as the gender that you are. And honestly, I feel at least comfortable enough to be able to say that I don't really give a fuck what other people think about me. If someone wants to call me, whatever gender pronoun, it might hurt a little. I know that I'm backing up from what I just said a second ago. Dysphoria can still hurt, it does hurt to be dysphoric. But there's a difference between someone doing something to you and, misgendering you and making you dysphoric, and just being around people who know that you're trans and who don't necessarily treat you differently. That might be limited based on where you live and the people that you're around. And I get that. And this is all something that you have to treat with nuance. Right now I'm just trying to introduce you to an idea to think about. But I think that right now it's more important than ever to just think about what it means to be trans. Because a lot of people have a very different view on that. And that's not news to anyone, but right now we're at a point where a lot of people are starting to drift towards one end or the other. All trans people are valid, or only some are, who are binary and medically transition and, all that. For non-binary people, it's a pretty easy pick for which side, because, sure, and you can, critique me and whatever on, if I get anything wrong. I'm just operating under my limited understanding of non-binary identity. But, most people who are non-binary don't have to medically transition, so it is a very different experience in that regard. But at the same time, just because I don't understand perfectly someone's experience does not mean that I shouldn't still take what they say and appreciate it and support them in however I can. I'm not going to pretend like I understand what it's like to be a non-binary person in today's society. I don't understand, and I'm never going to understand. But I at least know what it's like to be trans. And I know what it's like to live in a society that wants to give you a ton of shit just for who you are. And just because society might be a little bit more willing to accept me now because it's socially acceptable to, or getting to the point where it is, does not mean that we should leave someone else behind or a group behind just because it might be more convenient for us. Yeah. This is 29 minutes. I feel like most of my videos are sort of at 30 minutes. Now I'm gonna go work on torts right behind me. Which is gonna be fun. I'm actually enjoying torts. Professor in that class is, I've mentioned him a couple times, but he's a very engaging professor, so that'll be fun. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful. I'm sorry if I was a little ranty. I don't go off scripts. This is just all sort of what's on my mind. So I apologize if it was a little, wishy-washy or whatever you want to call it. But I hope that you got something out of it. So, alright. Catch you around, fam. Peace.